Everyone, welcome to my channel. In today's video, I'm super excited to share with all of you a palette in my collection that I really love, but I realized I haven't really featured yet on my channel. And that palette is this lovely 12-pan Sultry Muse palette from VISEART. So this is an all shimmer palette with a variety of different textures that is overall quite neutral, but also features some warm tone and cool tone shades. And I previously did a video dedicated to my VISEART Neutral Mattes palette, which is my other favorite everyday palette. And basically I love pairing Sultry Muse and this matte palette together for all of my everyday professional makeup looks. I think these palettes are just such a perfect combination if you want a really beautiful, effortless look and you're not going for something super glittery or glam, but you still want to have a little bit of creativity and you want some really beautiful seamless formulas. These palettes are more so geared towards makeup artists. That's why they just come in this very simple acrylic packaging, because if you're a makeup artist, basically you want to be able to really quickly see which shades you're picking up without having to open the compact, and also you don't need a mirror on your compact. And that's also why these palettes only have one type of formulation in them, with the Neutral Mattes just being matte and the Sultry Muse just being shimmers, because for makeup artists, they prefer to keep these textures separate so you don't get a lot of shimmers entering your mattes. Even though this is definitely not the most exciting palette to look at, I really love this palette on an everyday basis, and I would also highly recommend this for any folks who are concerned about texture on their eyelids, because the VISEART formula has such a beautiful and flattering satin finish. So this is great if you're not looking for a lot of wham bam glitter on your lids and you just want something that's really silky and ethereal but still has a bit of glow to it. So in today's video, I'm very excited to share swatches, a demo, and my overall thoughts about this palette. And I'm also going to be sharing with all of you my initial impressions of the Huda Beauty cream lipstick in the shade Moneymaker. That's what I have on my lips today. And this is kind of completely unrelated from the VISEART palette, but it's such a beautiful neutral lipstick, and I just happened to pick this up from Sephora recently. So I wanted to go ahead and share this with all of you. So without further ado, let's get into these swatches. So here we have the entire Sultry Muse palette swatched. So hopefully you guys can see that beautiful satin glimmer that these shades have. All of these shimmers are quite subtle in comparison to, say, a Pat McGrath or Natasha Denona palette, but where VISEART really excels is in beautiful satins that don't emphasize texture on your lids and create a lovely glow from within. So I would say that there's a few different finishes in this palette. There's one finish that does have some micro glitters in it. So this very white shade over here, these two lighter taupey shades, and then this light blue shade over here all have some slight micro glitters to them. So those are going to be slightly more shimmery than the other shades. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have some really satin finishes that are almost like a matte but have a satin sheen to them. And so those are the deeper shades. So this brown shade, this dark blue, almost black shade, and then this burgundy shade. This yellow at the end is also in a much more satin finish. And then the rest of the shades, so these four over here, are in a more metallic shimmer finish. So with the swatches out of the way, let's go into this makeup look. So starting off, I have my trusty Wayne Goss number 16 brush, and I'm gonna go into this satin shade over here, which is, I think, the closest to a transition shade in this palette. So I'm just gonna sweep this all over the crease area, and you can see that this definitely has a decent amount of shine to it. So I wouldn't recommend this normally as a transition shade, but again, the goal in today's look is just to put as many of these shades on my lids as possible and really make a Sultry Muse inspired look. So this shade is quite similar to my skin tone, so oftentimes I'll use this as my all over lid shade when I'm going for just a really natural everyday makeup look. Now to add just a little bit more depth, I'm gonna go into this burgundy shade. And I picked up a lot of this, so I'm gonna gently pack this in the outer third of both eyes. This is such a beautifully pigmented shade that just adds a bit of glamour and depth to any look that you're doing. Next, to add a little bit more depth, I'm gonna go in with my Wayne Goss number 19 brush into the darkest shade. And all of these pigments pick up very easily, so definitely you don't need to dig in order to get some payoff. And in case you guys aren't familiar with VISEART shadows, really what they're very famous for is how beautifully the shades translate on the lids. And so you're not going to have the problem of the shade looking one way in pan and then looking a different way on people's skin tones. VISEART is really catered towards makeup artists, so it's really important that the pigments show up on the skin the same way they do in pan. Next, with my GSN 9 brush, I'm going to take some of this orangey coral shade and just put this on the center of the lids. Cleaning that brush off, I'm going to take this rosy shade and use this just to help that orange blend into the brown. And then again, cleaning off that brush, I'm going into the rose gold shade and just tapping this onto the inner thirds of both eyes, just to add a little bit more light to that area. And as I mentioned, for me, this is one of my favorite shades to just put all over the lids if I'm doing an everyday, more professional look. Now with my Sonia G Pencil Pro, I'm going into this yellow shade and just placing this right on the inner corners. And for the brow bone, I'm going in with my Sonia G Mini Booster into this light shade over here. And this shade has slight micro glitters in it, so if you want something a bit more sparkly on the lids, this is a good way to go. But it's definitely less satin in finish in comparison to the other shadows. Also, just to add a little bit more light to the inner corners, I'm actually going to go into this shade, which has a slight bluish undertone to it, so I really love pairing this shade with these other two shades over here. And I'm just going to lightly add some of that to the inner corner just to further highlight that area. Now for the lower lash line, I'm first going to go into this rose gold shade on my Mini Booster and just sweep this satin shade all over the lower lash line. Then taking my smudger 1, I'm going to take a tiny bit of this deeper shade and just lightly tap this into the outer corners. And then using the other side of that brush, I'm going into this shade, which we haven't used so far. So this is kind of a golden taupe shade. And it also has a little bit of that micro glitter content in it. Lastly, I do want to just add a little bit more red to the lower lash line. So with my Esom G27, I'm going lightly into that burgundy shade. And I'm just going to add a little bit of this throughout that lower lash line area. Now I'm going to go off, finish my eyeliner and my face products and be right back. So I went in with my M Cosmetics brush liner in the shade brown. And then on the cheeks, I have my Gucci bronzer in the shade 2. And I have Mandalay Bay from my NARS Orgasm on the Beach palette all over my cheeks as blush. And then I went in with Naples as highlighter. And earlier in the video, I had my Lisa Eldridge Lip Embrace in the shade Muse, which is just a really great everyday lip gloss for me. But I took that off because I wanted to share with all of you my first impressions of the new Huda Beauty Bossy Browns Cream Lipstick. So these have been out for a little while and I've been eyeing them for a while as well. And at first I wasn't gonna pick them up because I heard a lot of bad things about folks getting them shipped and having them arrive broken. But the other day I was in Sephora and I swatched some of these and they were just so creamy that I couldn't help but pick one of these up for myself. So I have this in the shade Moneymaker, which is described as a medium rose brown. So it comes in this plastic box with a gradient, and the lipstick tube itself is a pretty lightweight plastic compact, also with a nice brown gradient. And it's a magnetic enclosure. And so here is the brand new untouched bullet for Moneymaker. And here is a swatch of the shade. Hopefully you guys can see just how creamy that is. And here's the shade on the lips. So I think normally I would go in with a lip liner underneath this, but I think it's deep enough that it looks great even just on its own. Also, I'm really impressed how this goes really well with this look, so I'm really excited about this combination. In terms of the lipstick formula, it is extremely creamy and hydrating on the lips. I am Really excited I picked this up because I'm a sucker for nourishing lip products and I love pigmented lip balms, pigmented lip glosses, but this is probably the most comfortable lipstick formula that I've tried this year. The product does have a slight fragrance to it, so kind of a mix between a tropical coconut cocoa butter scent and a slight floral scent. Also, I would just say based on first impressions, I love this lip shade because for me personally, I find it pretty hard to find a perfect nude for myself because most nude lipsticks either run a little bit too light or a little bit too cool toned on me. So what I find in a lot of light is that the lipstick will sort of look very ashen and kind of just drain all the life out of my look. But this one I think is a really great match for me. And I think these are also only $20 some, so pretty good deal for a higher end product. The packaging is definitely nothing to write home about. If you buy it in store, you don't have to worry about it breaking in shipping. And I think it still looks quite chic even though it's in this plastic packaging. So now that we have the finished look, let's go into my overall thoughts about this Sultry Muse palette. So this is actually my first time doing a look using exclusively this palette and also incorporating so many of the shades from this palette. Overall, I would say I'm quite impressed with this look. I think because a lot of these shades have a slightly more satin finish, the fact that I didn't have any mattes in this look actually turned out fine. All of these shades are just so easy to work with and just blend beautifully into each other. And it's also very easy to pick up the shades. You saw that I maybe picked up a little bit too much pigment for a few of the shades, but they all blended out super easily. There is a tiny bit of fallout when you use this palette because the VISEART shimmers have a slightly powdery finish to them. I personally don't mind that and find that it's pretty easy to just clean off the fallout, but I did want to just mention that. As you can see from today's look, the overall palette's vibe is definitely quite neutral, natural, and everyday, as long as you exclude these two cool tone shades. The way I like to normally use this palette is basically just to draw from one or two of these shades when putting together an everyday look. So I'll usually first take my neutral mattes palette, go into this as my transition shade, and then go into one of these two shades just to deepen things up a little bit. If I want slightly more dimension, I'll go into this deepest brown shade. And then I'll dip into this palette either for one of these taupey shades as an all over lid color, or if I want something that's a little bit more subtle and similar to my skin tone, I'll go in with this rose gold shade, which is roughly the same depth as my skin tone, but has a bit more of that rosy flush to it. I will admit I'm not a huge fan of these two shades with micro glitter in them. They're pretty sheer on their own, so I usually use them for inner corner or brow bone highlight, but I like to blend them until a lot of the micro glitters have fallen away from my face. But in case you do like a little bit more glitter or twinkle to your look, those are available. Today's look was very warm toned, but I also do really love using these two cool tone shades in this palette, and I'll put up here some footage of a look that I did really focusing on those two shades just so you can see kind of the cool toned alternative with this palette. Those shades are really perfect if you want that sort of sultry ice queen kind of look, and I think it's a really approachable way to incorporate blues into your eyeshadow. So overall, I am a huge fan of this palette. Like a lot of professional makeup palettes, it's not the most interesting to look at, but it's extremely useful, and I do find myself just using this palette all the time on an everyday basis because on most days I'm not really going for a super glamorous look when I'm just going to work or going shopping or something like that. And so if you want something that's just kind of your own beauty but slightly enhanced, this is a great palette to draw from. But also, as you saw from today's video, if you do want something a little bit more smoky, a little bit more glam, this palette also has you covered. So that's it for today's video. Let me know what you guys think about these sorts of videos where I go through some products that have kind of been in my collection for a while and are not exactly new makeup, but that are palettes that I really love and just want to share with you. So let me know if these sorts of videos are helpful. Also, if any of you are fans of VISEART palettes, definitely let me know down below what your favorite VISEART palette is, because personally, I think VISEART is kind of underrated. I really love collecting their eyeshadow palettes and think they just have one of the most amazing eyeshadow formulas. If you're someone who has any issues with blendability or issues with eyeshadows not really showing up the way you expected them to based on the color and pan, then VISEART is a brand that I would highly recommend looking into. So thank you all so much for joining me today, and if you guys like this video, then please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate all the support, and I'll catch you guys next time. Bye!